As Taiwan's pro-secession leader Tsai Ing-wen plans to transit through the U.S. en route to the Caribbean, the Solomon Islands, Taiwan's largest partner in the South Pacific, will decide on its relationship with Taipei. Will the possible loss of Taiwan's largest official partner in the South Pacific trigger a domino effect on others? How will the political mood evolving in Taiwan affect cross-strait relations? And what should be done to counter U.S. intervention in China's internal affairs through arms sales to the island? To discuss these and many other issues related to Taiwan and more, I'm pleased to be joined in the studio by Victor Gao Zhikai, Vice President of the Center for China and Globalization, and Dr. Zhong Houtao, Research Fellow at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. We will also talk with Joanna Lei, Managing Director of Azu Management Limited, via satellite. That's our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui. Gentlemen, the Solomon Islands government says it will probably abandon Taipei in 100 days. What do you think should be the motives behind its decision to reconsider the official ties with Taipei? What would happen to other remaining countries in this same region that allegedly still keep the official ties with Taiwan?
Well, assume if Solomon Island government makes the right decision, then there will only be about 16 countries remaining which still recognize Taiwan. I think this decision will definitely be the correct decision. Come on, just compare the size of the economy of mainland China versus Taiwan. For any country which really cares about the fundamental interests of their own people, it is absolutely the right thing to establish official diplomatic relations with the People's Republic of China, while, for example, still maintaining economic and social trade relations with Taiwan. So they eventually may get the benefits of the two sides of the coin.
Dr. Zhong, we have a chronic concern about the so-called international breathing space of Taiwan.
Yes.
During the previous generations of Taiwanese authorities. For example, we were afraid that if we were to put the frog in hot water,
yes,
then Taiwan would be forced to declare independence.
Exactly.
And that would be a major concern for the mainland. It means any rush to reduce the world space, the international breathing space of Taiwan, would endanger the cross-strait relationship. Do you think this danger still exists?
In the past, maybe it existed for some time. As for now, I don't think it is still a very sensitive issue, because as for Taiwanese, Taiwan people, they are not so concerned or so sensitive about the international space. They just care about their own lives, their own income. They are not so concerned about the international participation, especially about their diplomatic partners. Those 17, the diplomatic partners. As for most of the Taiwanese people, actually, they don't have a chance to visit those countries. Even for some Taiwanese people, they don't know where those diplomatic partners are, and what's the size of those diplomatic partners. So in one word, they are not so concerned. They are just concerned about themselves.
Let me cross over to Joanna Lei. Hi, Joanna. Now, given the frosty mistrust between Taipei and Beijing at this moment, particularly after the DPP took power, do you have the strong sense that the current relationship between the two sides of Taiwan will be elevated to a kind of a crisis when you look at the reconsideration by the Solomon Islands to possibly sever the diplomatic relationship? It's not reconsideration. It's a serious decision, perhaps, in the making by the Solomon authorities to sever its diplomatic ties with Taipei.
Well, I think MOFA has tried to send some warning signals to people in Taiwan already by implicating that Solomon Islands has a very strong timber trade with mainland China. In terms of its economic relations, it has a lot to gain from establishing a diplomatic tie with mainland China. on the other hand, it still will be a fairly major defeat for the Tsai government. The Tsai government has a very strong southbound policy, one of which is to position Taiwan as a leading island among the southern language island groups, meaning there is a vast body of water across these islands. There is a community, a bond, very close bond in the southern island language groups. And Taiwan is positioned by the Tsai government as the leading island, actually the largest and most advanced among all these islands, and Solomon certainly is one of those. So such a perhaps eventuality will still hurt Taiwan, not in terms of economic or otherwise, but in terms of the overall doctrine or the overall theme of the southbound policy made by the DPP and promoted by Tsai Ing-wen.
Obviously, a sense of crisis is looming larger on the horizon for the so-called international space of Taipei at this moment. Victor, the Solomon Islands, one of Taipei's remaining diplomatic partners in the Pacific, sent delegations to study Chinese aid in neighboring countries, including Vanuatu, Fiji, Samoa, Tonga, and Papua New Guinea, as it considers a potential diplomatic switch to Beijing. The delegation leader said on June the 24th, the question is, Victor, how do you evaluate China-Pacific cooperation and the impact of the Maritime Silk Road?
Well, first of all, China has very robust and dynamic and mutually beneficial relations with many South Pacific countries. I, for example, visited Fiji as early as in 1985, and the records speak for itself that China, South Pacific island countries have mutually beneficial relationship. And from these island countries' perspective, you are talking about mainland China with 1.4 billion people, the second largest economy in the world, versus Taiwan, which has 23 million people also. So the choice will be inevitable. I think given time, probably they will all want to do the switch. They want to have the best of the two worlds, that is diplomatic recognition with China, mainland China, and economic and social trade relations still with Taiwan. So I think Solomon Island this time will make the right decision and will also speed up the process involving other countries in the Pacific region to make that most important switch from Taiwan to the People's Republic of China.
Well, this kind of dollar diplomacy is likely to drain the coffers of both sides, Taipei and Beijing.
Yes.
Do you think Beijing takes the consideration of the Solomon Islands very seriously? Because dollar diplomacy is something China does not like very much, to be honest.
As for Chinese mainland, we welcome any country to establish the relationship with the Chinese mainland, since the Solomon is preparing to establish its relationship with the Chinese mainland. I think for us, we of course welcome their decision. And another point is that I think it is an international trend. As for now, more than 170 members of the United Nations have recognized have recognized the PRC and the sole government of the China. So I think this is an international trend. The following 17 countries, I mean the 17 Taiwan's diplomatic partners will follow this trend. And just as Victor Go said, this is also for their own national interest. Just to take Solomon Islands as an example, Chinese mainland is its largest trading partner. If it could normalize its relationship with the Chinese mainland, I think it will attract much more investment from Chinese mainland, and it will attract more tourists from Chinese mainland, and this will become a very great motives for their economic and social development. So I think this is not only just an international trend, but also it is for their own national interest.
Let me go back to Joanna. Probably we have all underestimated the political sophistication of the Solomon Island authorities. If you look at their game to play power politics, it just wants to leverage resources from Taipei, the Chinese mainland, Washington, and perhaps Canberra of Australia. Look at the Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison, who has made the first visit of an Australian leader to the Solomon Islands in a decade on June. And Morrison's visit is a further demonstration of his government's commitment to the Pacific setup. Canberra's desire to re-engage with the region. What do you think of the latest moves, a policy move by the Australian government to put the Solomon Islands into its own orbit?
Well, I certainly think we are into an era of sea power. Major sea powers will compete against each other in terms of having their land bases set in different islands. It's almost like an extension of the South China Sea story, when South China Sea's little reef or islands are being contested by different countries. Alongside those islands, you can expand it and look at a greater diamond, which is United States, Japan, Australia, and India. So with this big diamond, all the body of water within that big diamond will be contested, and all the islands will be contested as well. So it is not surprising for us to see Australia decided to take a position. And in fact, they do have a very strong relationship with Solomon, even though politically it might not be very strong, but culturally with the Australian and New Zealanders, the local indigenous people have a very strong relationship with Solomon Islands. Therefore, they can even claim a historical tie, cultural tie, language tie with those islands and try to secure and cement their ability to use those islands as naval bases. It's the time of sea powers.
Okay, maritime powers and their game, of course. Joanna, over 95% of the members of the United Nations have established diplomatic relationship with the PRC. By the way, the United Nations boasts of 192 members at this moment. Now, what do you think of the possibility that other remaining countries that have the alleged official ties with Taipei would follow the domino effect and perhaps reconsider their official ties with Taipei very seriously?
Well, which is a very strong possibility. But Taiwan has gone through this yo-yo a long, long time ago. At one point, Taiwan has no ability to hold on to any of the diplomatic ties. But the ones who are remaining also face a new rising China, which is very different from when Taiwan established those ties with Central American nations. For example, some of them, for religions and other reasons, are very anti-communism. But now they're looking at the new China, which is very different. So Taiwan is really at the losing end of diplomatic contest. However, if you look at the current political leaders, they came back to appeal to the people in Taiwan, saying, you know, look, when Ma Ying-jeou was in power, he has a lot of weaknesses. However, we have been given some international space. Look at WHA, ICAO, and those are still better for Taiwan rather than having none. So those international organizations are probably going to be the next possibilities for Taiwan to continue participation internationally.
Thank you very much, Joanna. Dr. Zhong, Joanna provided us with a deep, insightful analysis about the ideological legacy of the Cold War concerning the 5 remaining island countries that still maintain official ties with Taipei. To what degree do you think they would have to rediscover the nature of the Chinese government instead of remaining in the shadow of the Cold War?
I think this is really a new play for those countries. As for Chinese mainland in the past, just as Joanna said, it takes Chinese mainland as a communist party China and a red China. But as for now, it takes China as the second largest economy in the world. So they just want to normalize their relationship with the Chinese mainland. Actually, the two sides have established a very good relationship, and their cooperation covers many aspects, including trade and investment. And actually, the Chinese mainland has become the largest the second largest partner with all those more than 10 those Pacific Islands countries. And the second aspect is about tourism. And the Chinese mainland tourists become the #1, the largest group for those countries. And the third one is infrastructure. The Chinese mainland invests a lot in those countries and help their economic and social development. And the last one, and the most, of course, the most important one is the environmental protection. The Chinese mainland help them to deal with the climate change, and this indeed help them a great lot.
Probably Beijing will give a generous promise about what if the low-lying islands were to be immersed in the rising sea levels.
Exactly.
We could provide them with a shelter. Well,
yes.
That's a joke. This meant to be not a very good joke. I'm sorry for this. I don't know. Victor, what do you think of the element of the United States? What do you think of, say, Washington that might get in the way of our process of normalizing the relationship with other remaining countries in the South Pacific? President Trump and his hawkish team in the D.C. overwhelmingly support the alleged democratic government in Taipei, and they used ideological elements to reinforce their traditional position to safeguard Taiwan as a aircraft carrier that would not sink, according to General MacArthur, in the wake of the Second World War. What do you think of, say, Washington?
A couple of things. First of all, the United States under President Trump is playing a very, very negative and destabilizing role in terms of the bilateral relations, cross-strait relations between mainland China and Taiwan. That's number one. I think there are people in Washington who are determined to use Taiwan as a chip in the geopolitical scheming of the United States in terms of derailing China's peaceful rise. At least this is a suspicion here in Beijing. Secondly, the United States is really doing a double standard. The United States, after all, established diplomatic relations back in 1979 with China by abandoning Taiwan as an ally, withdrawing all the U.S. troops from Taiwan, and also severing diplomatic relations with Taiwan. It's for 40 years. But now the United States is talking to each and several of these countries, 17 altogether, which still maintain diplomatic relations with Taiwan, saying you should not abandon diplomatic relations with Taiwan. You should not recognize the People's Republic of China, and if you do so, there will be consequences. How come, for example, the United States should do this kind of thing? And this is the United States which still maintains diplomatic relations with the People's Republic of China and is engaging with China in all fronts, for positive or negative things. But I think the United States seems to be determined to be a blocking factor in terms of China's relations with these 17 remaining countries which still recognize Taiwan as the sole representative of China. And I think China and the Chinese government need to be very smart in dealing with this situation and really considering the fact that the United States is doing all it can to destabilize the situation.
Well, I just want to add several points. The first is that why the United States is helping Taiwan to maintain their diplomatic partners. The most important reason is that the United States take Latin American, take Pacific Island countries as they are backyards, they are back gardens. So the United States think that the Chinese mainland is eroding its superpower in this area. So I think the United States think that to help Taiwan to maintain diplomatic partners is to help United States itself. So that's the reason. And as to help Taiwan, United States have taken a lot of measures. For example, before the Salvador cutting its relationship with Taiwan, the U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton directly made a call with the president of Salvador, said, if you would cut relationship with Taiwan, United States would those download or stop to provide any aid for your country. That is, the Joe Biden was directly threatening Salvatore. And another example is that the United States, Mike Pompeo said the United States would do whatever we could do to help Taiwan to maintain its diplomatic partners and to help Taiwan to maintain in the international space.
Let me go to Joanna. Many observers in the Chinese mainland pointed out that Taiwan would only be used by Washington as a strategic resource to leverage. It means automatically that Americans in the D.C. would not allow the situation of Taiwan or the cross-strait relationship to spin out of control. Otherwise, they would have lost the strategic resources. It means, in the words of Alan Johnson, head of Brookings Institution, that the issue of Taiwan could be managed. It won't lose control. I mean, Washington will not lose control. What do you think of, the U.S. influence on Taiwan, and to what degree do you think the issue of Taiwan could be managed? I mean, crisis management is controllable.
Well, certainly there are primary concerns and secondary concerns. In terms of primary concerns, which will be directly towards Taiwan and its other relations, it goes into two blocks. One is in the Indo-Pacific blocks, and those will be directly contributable to the U.S. strategy or its strategic interest. And the second block is what Zhong Hotao was talking about. That is, the Latin American countries that would be considered in the U.S. backyard. So these two blocks are direct primary concerns. However, the secondary issues and secondary concerns is Taiwan issue is never independent, nor is it alone. It is now being used as a lever or a chip, and partly in the discussion between the United States and mainland China. So you see Taiwan issue pop up in G20, and that is between the two major leaders in terms of their independent or individual interests with regard to Taiwan and its position. Taiwan was no part of it. So standing from Taiwan, I think is the unfortunate fact that Taiwan is now being used by the United States as a lever, as a bargaining chip, and also perhaps as a future strategic asset, a potential place. If an unlikely event of a war should happen, Taiwan could still be a military base, and that, to me, is the very unfortunate future for Taiwan.
Joanna, let's look at what President Xi Jinping said on January the 2nd to commemorate the 40th anniversary of the message to compatriots in Taiwan. And he said it's time to reevaluate the practical approach. Now, what did he mean, particularly when you look at the issue in the context of the latest political unrest in Hong Kong, following the SCR government's move, yes, to consider seriously the fugitive bill?
Well, certainly we've been in the rhetoric for a long, long time. We talked about 92 consensus. We talked in principle about one China, two systems. And all this rhetoric has generated a lot of understanding or misunderstandings. I think what Mr. Xi Jinping sent to Taiwan as a message is he's willing to sit down and talk about practical approaches. What does one country, two systems really mean? If we want to continue to honor 92 consensus, what is the nature and what is the rules, the do's and don'ts, the doctrines, the code of behaviors? Those are the things that we should be able to engage bilaterally across Taiwan Straits without the U.S. participation. I think if we look at the Korea Peninsula, the best result is achieved by the two sides talking directly and not allowing the United States or Japan to dictate their future. So hopefully Taiwan and mainland China could go back to the sort of right route of co-development, economic discussion, as well as system discussion in terms of how we end the unfortunate situation since 1949 and how we can coexist in a structure that both sides can agree on.
Thank you so much, Joanna. Victor, let's look at the impact of the political ecosystem in Taiwan, given the upcoming 2020 elections in this island, without exceptions, cross-strait relations would always be taken as a serious issue for the campaign. Do you think the DPP would leverage the latest political unrest in Hong Kong to hammer home the message, look, today's Hong Kong will be Taiwan's tomorrow, and do you think the electorate in Taipei will heed the advice and add more to the support for the DPP leadership?
Well, first of all, what happened in Hong Kong in recent weeks, especially on July the 1st, is very unfortunate. And the violence and the rioting, vandalism which happened on July the 1st really managed to damage the rule of law tradition in Hong Kong. It should be condemned as it is, and legal consequences need to apply to those who commit these violence. Now, Hong Kong situation and Taiwan situation are very different, and I think people in Taiwan need to be very wary of, for example, some superpower really misusing the relations between mainland China and Taiwan, and eventually Taiwan become a chip, and eventually in case of emergencies, for example, the living standards or the safety and the happiness of the people in Taiwan may be actually very much detrimented. So it will be in the Chinese people's overall interest for us to talk directly and try to move closer to reunification and come up with very good arrangements so that people in mainland China as well as in Taiwan should be happy about getting reunified with each other. And we'll be happy that a reunited China will become a much more solid platform for people on both sides of the Taiwan Strait to prosper and grow into the future.
Dr. Zhong, very quickly, since DPP has lost the major seats in last year's municipal and local elections, what is to be expected in the 2020 election?
As for the DPP, it has a bad chance to win in the next election because, generally speaking, the Taiwan voters could be divided into three parts: blue camp, like green camp, and those swing voters. And so it is very difficult for Tsai Ing-wen or DPP to win the swing voters, and I think that will be a great challenge for DPP.
How do you see the game changing across the street? Will these moves push Tsai Ing-wen towards a more independent and separatist trend? What's the chance for the DPP, with particularly the strong backing of Washington? They're going to go down the road and run the risk of getting very close to the de jure independence.
As for the DPP, it has a good chance, or it is highly possible that it will move towards the Taiwan independence path. In the past 3 years, the Tsai Ing-wen authority just trying to take a new path named soft Taiwan independence. But as for now, it is trying to revise some Taiwan local laws and try to take itself as independent sovereignty. So I think it is irritating Chinese mainland. It will, if it move just a little bit further, I think that will be a great challenge for cross-strait relations.
To conclude our very meaningful discussion here about the Taiwan and cross relations, Dr. Zhong, would you quickly brief us on a possibility that should the KMT take power in the election, then the Chinese mainland would consider seriously giving up or delaying the battles with Taiwan, winning more small countries from the Caribbean region and the South Pacific region?
If the KMT return to power, I think it is a good chance for Chinese mainland to resume political dialogue with the KMT, and I think that will be a good news for cross-strait relationship, and it will prepare a solid basis for the peaceful reunification.
Let's keep our fingers crossed. For the truce between Taipei and Beijing, if the one China principle could be adhered to. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.